Hi, I am Jessica Anderson, and this is my research presentation, Homes for Homeless Veterans. I find homelessness, specifically among veterans, to be one of the most important social issues that our country faces today. My passion for this issue is primarily driven by my personal connection to the military. My father and grandfather both served in the Army, and my little sister is currently in AIT training. So far, my family has been lucky enough to never experience homelessness, though I don't believe that any veteran should have to experience this. And 20% of the homeless population, which is over 130,000 individuals on the street on any given night, are veterans. There are various risk factors for homelessness, various reasons that these veterans can become homeless. These reasons include the length of time served, mental health issues, as well as partner violence. And so to help with some of these risk factors, there are various services offered to veterans through the VA. However, the veterans would have to go to specific facilities to utilize this treatment. They would have to meet specific eligibility requirements and be able to work the complex system. So a lot of these services don't get utilized, and the veterans remain homeless, though there are various types of housing offered to homeless individuals. Some are specific to veterans, some are for the homeless in general. So some of these options include homeless shelters, transitional housing, and a newer form of program called the Housing First approach. So the most significant risk factor for homelessness is mental health issues. Studies have shown that 76% of veterans experience a mental health condition. One of the most prevalent mental health conditions among veterans is post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. This causes a negative change in the way the person reacts to stimuli and is directly related to the traumatic events that they experienced. It's most common among veterans 25 years of age or younger. However, older adults can definitely experience this as well. Another common mental health condition homeless veterans suffer from is substance use disorder. Men are more likely to develop this condition along with avoidance issues than women, and they oftentimes use it as a coping mechanism, which is one of the reasons that it's very prevalent, and it's a substantial risk factor among the homeless population in general. So to treat these mental health conditions, there are various VA services offered. There are over 1,000 healthcare facilities that accept VA healthcare. This includes various medical centers and outpatient or inpatient services, though only 23 to 40% of veterans that are diagnosed with a mental health condition actually seek treatment. Why do so few veterans utilize these services and seek treatment when there are so many centers that they could go to, different facilities that they can go to? Well, there are various eligibility requirements that these veterans must meet, and oftentimes the veterans don't know the requirements or they don't meet them all, so they can't utilize the service. Like I said, it's also a very complex system, so many veterans have a difficult time navigating it, so they aren't able to utilize it. And then among homeless veterans, they have a lot of issues with traveling to the facilities. Very few homeless veterans have means of transportation. They don't have cars, they can't afford bus fare or train tickets, things like that. And so they cannot travel to a facility and receive treatment. There's also a stigma that's associated with mental health illnesses. A veteran that suffers from a mental health condition may feel weak or that they have a personal defect, causing them to lean on substances to cope with this condition, and they feel like they should just be able to handle it themselves, when it's in fact treatable. They just need to go to a facility to receive that treatment. But by normalizing treatment of mental health conditions, we can reduce the stigma and encourage more veterans and individuals in general that suffer from mental health conditions to be treated. And so that would lead to fewer veterans on the street, But until then, we do have some different forms of housing options that are available to homeless veterans. Homeless shelters are an option. Some of them receive government funding, but they don't receive enough funding for all homeless veterans. They only receive enough funding for approximately 8,000 beds when there are 130,000 homeless veterans on the street every night. They don't receive nearly enough funding, nor are these facilities specific for veterans. So some of the individuals utilizing this shelter may be veterans. Many of them aren't. So the individuals would arrive around dinner. They can stay overnight, but they don't have a private room. They often share bunks, and so they're in very close proximity to each other, allowing diseases to spread very easily among these shelters. The shelters also don't offer any form of training to the individuals, so they don't gain any skills or receive any counseling or treatment or anything like that. So in no way does this shelter help them transition back into society or back into the normal life. I volunteered at homeless shelters, so I've seen how it operates. How the men and women just come, they stay in the night, they're forced into a room where they're in close proximity to each other, not even an arm's length away, having dinner, breakfast, and then they were able to watch a movie, but they were still in the same room, very close to each other. I was not able to actually go see the sleeping area in this shelter that I volunteered at, but I don't imagine it was any different from what I had previously described about the bunks where they share, and it's very close and easy for disease to spread. And then they wake up very early after they eat breakfast, they're back on the streets. So it really does not help them secure any form of permanent housing or get any training that they need. The next form of housing that veterans can utilize is transitional housing. These programs often receive funds from the government, from the PRDM grants and various other aid, though these programs are very high demanding programs. They require the veteran to be housing ready prior to being admitted or beginning the program. They must be sober. They must participate in treatment and services. They are paired with a case manager and work very closely with this case manager to establish a treatment plan, and they must comply to the treatment plan. If they don't, they will no longer be eligible for the program. So the veterans can stay up to 2 years at these facilities and will hopefully have permanent housing set up by the time that they complete the program. This type of program did decrease the urgent care visits among veterans by 18% and the inpatient mental health treatment by 98%. So this is a very effective form of housing for veterans, and it helps them utilize the services that they are eligible for versus just going to emergency rooms and urgent cares and getting treatment there. So there are traditional types of transitional housing that are just like a typical house. They can host about 8 to 10 veterans or individuals through the program. But there's also a new type of transitional housing that I think is really cool and very efficient, which are teeny house villages. These teeny house villages are very cost effective, and they're a very innovative way to house many individuals in a small proximity, as well as do it in a budget-friendly way. These teeny homes are environmentally friendly as well, though they do face some issues when it comes to zoning and housing codes. But we are lucky enough in Missouri that these various building codes are not super strict on teeny houses, and so the Kansas City Veteran Community Project has established a teeny house village for veterans in Kansas City. It's recently opened this year in February 2018. It currently has 13 houses, though they hope to expand it over time. At this specific teeny house village, the veterans live rent-free. However, they must engage in job training, drug rehabilitation, counseling, any form of treatment or rehabilitation type course that their case manager feels they need to and it's specific for them. They're very strict on compliance with their treatment plan, and if the veteran does not comply with it, they break the rules and they get evicted from their house. And that has happened with one veteran. She did not want to comply with the treatment plan. She didn't feel like she needed to, and so she was evicted, so that a veteran that did want to better themselves and participate in these plans and services can utilize it. Another really awesome thing that this Casey Teeny House Village allows veterans to do is have pets. A lot of pets provide emotional support to individuals, but they also have support from their family because they can have visitors. Their children can stay with them, other relatives can stay, and so they get that support that they really need from their family as well as the community. This Teeny House Village is a community full of veterans that are participating in similar treatments and everything, so it gives them the support that they need and encouragement to continue on and to face the hardships that they're going through. It gives them some privacy. They each have their own little house, so they can be in there by themselves when they want, but also be interactive with their neighbors when they want. So it gives them that independence, their privacy, as well as a sense of community. And then the next form of housing, which I think is the most effective form of housing from the studies that I've researched, is the housing first approach. With this approach, individuals do not have to be housing ready, so they do not have to be 100% sober before they begin this program. They are allowed to search for permanent housing, which begins immediately, as well as they are working towards their sobriety. And so the housing first approach often has a database that has pre-inspected housing units listed in it, and the case manager will find the housing unit that's most suitable for the specific veteran. So I can get them into this permanent housing very quickly. This type of approach also allows the veterans to utilize community-based supportive services, mainstream services. They help the veteran access their VA benefits, as well as offer case management 24/7. So the veteran can get help from a case manager at any time of day whenever they need it for whatever. And so studies have shown that this housing first approach takes between 1 month to 35 days to transition a veteran from one facility into their permanent housing unit, whereas the usual traditional transitional program takes between 6 months to 223 days to transition them into their permanent residence. And then the housing rates with this study were over 10% higher for the housing first approach than they were for the traditional transitional housing. After 12 months, the housing first approach retention rate was at 98%, and the traditional transitional process was at 86%. So it has a very high retention rate. They both do, but the housing first approach is more effective. And it decreased the urgent care visits by 66% and inpatient mental health treatment by 39%. So it also connects them with their services that they are eligible for and helps them utilize them versus seeking emergency care and emergent services. So we have examined the different options of healthcare and housing that's available to homeless veterans. We know that there are various reasons for why veterans become homeless. However, the most substantial risk factor for homelessness is mental health illnesses. There are services offered to veterans that can treat these conditions, though veterans face many problems utilizing their VA benefits, which include the complexity of this system, transportation issues, and the stigma that's associated with mental health. And so over time, we can reduce the stigma and encourage more veterans to seek treatment. But they also need the help that these housing programs, specifically the transitional programs and housing first approach, offers them to connect them to these services. As we work towards this, our society needs to provide more funding for programs and create the most effective form of transitional housing for veterans to get them back into normal life and to be active members of society again. The housing first approach, in my opinion, is the most effective option because it gives the individual time to become housing ready while simultaneously securing a permanent residence for them. This is the housing approach I would encourage my relatives to participate in if they ever experienced homelessness, though I hope they never do, and I hope that eventually no veteran will ever have to experience homelessness. Thank you.